Hey, it's Clara and welcome to No Can Do. I believe you don't know what you can do until you try. And today I tried refinishing an antique dresser that my friends Austin and Kayla gave to me for free. If you like DIY projects, furniture flipping, or want to learn how to refinish something for yourself, you are in the right place. So to see what I did, what I learned, and all the mistakes that I made, just keep watching. This dresser is hardwood and was in pretty good condition except for the top, which had a lot of cut marks and dings and scratches on it. And the drawers needed a little bit of work as well, so I just decided to refinish this dresser. The first thing I did was to give this dresser a good clean. I used Simple Green, which is a good degreaser. I just let that sit for a few minutes, then I wiped it all back, and then I used a clean wet rag and some clean water to go back and get all of that Simple Green off of the dresser. Next up, I used a flathead screwdriver and removed all the hardware from the piece. It's really important to keep all your hardware in a safe place. It's really easy for it to get lost, especially this one had some really small washers on it, and I didn't want to lose those. So that's just a tip. Maybe put it in a container with a lid so that you don't lose any of your hardware. Once I got the hardware off, it was time to make some repairs. So this drawer was coming apart, so I just took a little bit of wood glue and some sandpaper to it. The sandpaper was just kind of smoothing out the surface where I was going to be putting in some new glue. I put in some wood glue in all the little cracks and crevices, and then I used a piece of spare wood that I had lying around to kind of lay flat and have a surface that I could be putting my clamps onto. So that's something that I've learned recently is if you just put your clamp on your piece, it's going to apply pressure just to that one spot. But if you put the clamp on a piece of wood on top of your piece, that can help assure that the whole area is getting the same amount of pressure. Once I got the clamps on and the glue was starting to dry, I looked inside the piece, found a pair of dirty old socks. Austin, Kayla, do you want those back? And I just cleaned the inside of the dresser. The next thing I did was apply Citristrip. Citristrip is a chemical stripper that can remove varnishes and stains and paint and things like that. So I just used a cheap chip brush and I poured some of the Citristrip onto a paper plate. And of course I used gloves and I was wearing a respirator as well. And I just tried to apply this evenly in sections. Then I went over each section that I had completed and I covered the whole area with plastic because I've heard that you don't want to let Citristrip get dry. If it gets dry, it can harden and then it's really hard to remove. I just worked in sections to make sure that I got the whole piece covered in Citristrip and then layered plastic on top of it. By the time I had finished covering the last section in Citristrip, the Citristrip had been sitting on the top of the piece for about a half hour. So I took a plastic putty knife and I just worked on scraping the Citristrip off. This was actually pretty difficult and became kind of a sticky, gooey, gross mess. So I'm not sure exactly what I did wrong. I'm wondering if I should have just used more Citristrip and layered on half an inch of it, or if I should have had a wider or bigger putty knife. I was a little worried about using a metal scraper or putty knife because I didn't want to damage the wood, but I eventually did switch to one. So I didn't really enjoy my experience with Citristrip, and it also ended up kind of burning through or ruining several pairs of gloves that I had on. Anyway, maybe you have some ideas for me about how to better apply Citristrip. So once you're done getting it off of a section, you're supposed to take mineral spirits and wipe that area down in mineral spirits. So that's supposed to stop the chemical reaction of removing the varnish. So I just did that and tried to get off as much of it as I possibly could. I kind of felt like I was racing against the clock, so luckily for me, my friend Mackenzie came over and I put her to work and we both worked on getting the rest of the Citristrip off of this dresser. At this point, I had already gone through 3 pairs of gloves. I wasn't sure if it was the Citristrip or the mineral spirits, but each pair of gloves kept getting holes in the fingers, and these were brand new gloves. So I learned that you actually need special gloves to use with different types of chemicals. So I will link down in the description below the gloves I ended up with eventually, which are nitrile gloves, and those are safe to use with things like mineral spirits. So after finishing up with the Citristrip, you can see that the top is looking better and there aren't those cut marks or things anymore, but there are still some patches that are kind of glossy and have a little bit of that varnish left. So that was my first time with Citristrip. Like I said, it was a challenge and I still was going to have to sand. I alternated between using my orbital sander and just a power sander, and I started out with a 80 grit sandpaper, and then I worked my way up to higher and higher grits. So I started with 80, then I moved to 100, 120, eventually up to 180, and then eventually up to 220. So when you're sanding, you do need multiple different grits of sandpaper, and the lower you are, the more it's going to take off. So if you're using like a 60 or an 80 grit, it's really going to take a lot off of the piece. So you just have to be careful. This piece had a wood veneer on top of the hardwood, and I busted through a tiny bit of the veneer on the sides, which I'll show you a little bit later. So you just got to be really, really careful, especially when you're working with a lower grit sandpaper and when you're working with a power sander. I started sanding down the front of the piece and the drawers, and then my dad came by and offered to help me out with some of the detail sanding. I don't love the detail sanding, so I was really grateful to have his help and support getting into the tiny spaces near the keyhole that I couldn't get to with the sanders. So what he did was he just took a flathead screwdriver and he wrapped it in sandpaper and just went all around the keyhole right there with different grits of sandpaper. Thank you, Dad. Once I had sanded the whole thing down, I gave everything a wipe down with mineral spirits. Again, these were not the right gloves. That was the fourth pair of gloves that I burned through, but I will learn later on, so keep watching. But anyway, I just gave it all a wipe down with mineral spirits. That's really good because it kind of just removes the sanding dust and cleans the piece. Right here you can see on the edge where I had burned through a little bit of the veneer on top down to the wood below it. So I was a little bummed about that, but it wasn't the end of the world. I came back the next day to get into the feet and do a little bit more detail sanding. This was really interesting because these hardwood claw feet are very detailed and they were just pretty difficult to sand. So I had to come back on a day that I was feeling really patient to get this job done. It was time to get prepped for staining the piece. So I went over everything with a tack cloth, and I love these tack cloths. They pick up any little extra bits of dust or sanding dust. So I've linked those below. And then I went through again one more time and wiped the whole thing down with mineral spirits again. To stain it, I went ahead and used some red oak stain from Minwax and a foam brush. I did my best to just coat the whole piece with an even layer, and then after letting it sit for a few minutes, I went back and wiped back any of the excess with a cloth. To seal this piece, I used polyurethane, which is an oil-based finish, and it's really important that you do this in a well-ventilated area or wear a respirator. I was inside the garage because it was raining, but I was wearing a respirator and had one of the doors open. So I've also linked down below a respirator and some eyeglasses or goggles because you should just have on all the protection when you are working with chemicals and things like this. So here are my awesome nitrile gloves that I got that can withstand all the chemicals that I've been using. So I'm also going to link those down below because I wish that someone had told me about these way sooner. So I just tried to get an even coat of polyurethane over the whole piece, and then I let it dry overnight. I ended up coming back the next day and doing one more layer of polyurethane, and I did have to do a tiny bit of sanding between the coats. While I was waiting for the poly to dry, I went ahead and took the hardware home and gave it a good cleaning. I filled up a pot with half water and half white vinegar, and I boiled all of the hardware for about a half an hour. I saw this trick from another YouTuber named Katie Scott, who has the channel Salvage by Kay Scott. If you like her channel, let me know down below. I love her videos. When I was all done, the handles looked awesome, but I wanted them to be a different color. So they were more of like a copper color. So I got some liquid leaf, which I will also link down below. And I just used a small artist brush to brush this on. I think this is the most calming, relaxing, satisfying part of this whole video. So I'm just going to sit back and let you watch and enjoy. Once I was all done with the hardware, I came in to just make any last minute tweaks or fixes. I just sanded down that paint that was on the bottom of the inside of the top drawer and then wiped everything down with a wet rag. I really, really do love these like shop towels. They're microfiber cloths, which I'll also link. Then I went through with some Orange Grove Big Mama's Butter from Dixie Belle, and I just took it and put it inside all of the drawers. This helps just bring that wood to life. You can see here on the left I've applied it, on the right I have not applied it yet. So, I mean, obviously there's a stain, but it really just gives some richness to the wood, and it also smells really good. I then went on the inside of the dresser and put some of that on the tracks as well. That just helps the drawers slide in and out a little bit more smoothly. The hardware had dried and it was time to reattach it. I'm so glad I caught that face on camera. So now I went through and I just put the drawers back in. And here's the before. Again, it was already in pretty good shape except for the top and some repairs I needed to make in the drawers. Yeah, the top was pretty gnarly now that I'm looking at it again. And here is the after. I think it looks so good. I'm really, really pleased with the finish that I got. I love the handles. I think they really just pop so nicely on the piece. And I honestly just could not be happier with how this turned out. The only problem is that I have no idea how to price this. I am going to sell it or list it for sale on Facebook Marketplace and offer up, but I do not know what to charge. So if you have any ideas, I know everyone's town and city is different, but if you have any ideas, please let me know down in the comments below. What do you think this might be worth? And what do you think someone might pay for it? I'll let you know when I make the sale. In the meantime, like I said, I learned a lot throughout this process and I've linked down below every single product that I use. So if you have any questions, definitely let me know and check out all the stuff, especially the gloves, because those were a total lifesaver. It feels a little hard to know exactly how much I spent on this project because I had about 80% of the materials ahead of time. Things like a drill and mineral spirits, I've already bought those things before, so I'm just using them a little bit each time as I go. I went through several pairs of gloves and a lot of sandpaper. I'm gonna estimate that I spend around $40 on this project on materials. I didn't calculate how much time I spent on it, so I'm just gonna have to do better about that next time. But like I said, I'm not sure how much to list this for, so I really need your help with that. Please type down in the comments below how much you think I should list this for sale. We'll see. I want to thank you so much for being here, being a part of this community, and for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe before you go if you haven't already, and I will see you at the next flip. Thanks.